Hello, welcome to University Television Presents. I'm Anna Silver, and today my guest is someone who has a long career in business in Idaho. He served 3 terms in Congress, served longer than anyone in the state of Idaho as Lieutenant Governor, and now this is his 3rd term in his current position. I would like to welcome Governor C.L. Butch Otter.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
It's great to have you here. I'd like to start out with some of your background. I know you graduated from St. Teresa's Academy. Is that correct?
That's right. I was born in Caldwell, educated for the most part right here in the Valley. Went to St. Teresa's Academy, which is now Bishop Kelly. That's where I graduated from high school. And then my first 2 or 3 semesters I spent at an abbey, a Benedictine Abbey in Lacey, Washington, St. Martin's Abbey. I was studying to be a Benedictine, but that didn't work out. When they told me I couldn't be Pope, I said, I'm leaving then. But I didn't come back to Boise Junior College and spent 2 semesters here, then went to the College of Idaho where I got my bachelor's degree in political science.
Okay. Did you always know what you wanted to do? And back then, could you imagine yourself becoming governor of Idaho?
Well, you know, I don't know that I really thought that much about being governor. I did spend 2 terms in the House of Representatives in the early 70s, and I didn't like that. You know, when you come from the business world, an idea at lunch can be company policy at 1 o'clock. Well, politics doesn't move quite that fast. And when you're making public policy, it shouldn't. It should be very deliberative and consider all points of view. And so I left in 1976. I didn't run for re-election and became president of Simplot International in 1979. And then ran again for, then the next stint into politics was in 1986, I ran for lieutenant governor. And you
were there for 4 terms,
is that correct? I was reelected 4 times before I went to Congress. So I actually served 3.5 terms because I left in the middle of my 4th term to go to the 106th Congress. I was elected in 2000 and served there till 2006.
Okay.
When I became governor.
All right. And then going back to your background, what are some of the things that prepared you for the position you are in now, like back when you were in high school and college?
Well, the position that I'm in now, you know, there's a lot of consideration and sometimes confrontation between the executive branch and the legislative branch and the judicial branches of government, all separate but equal branches. And so I was raised in a family of 9 kids, so, you know, I got used to that confrontation. But I also got used to working a path forward. So, you know, I would say the business world probably prepared me better because you build expectations in business and then you follow through on those expectations. You monitor them to make sure what you thought was going to happen when you employed the money or employed the personnel and the assets. We should be doing that, and we do that. Same thing in government.
Right. I know, did you participate in Rodeo?
Yes.
And do you still participate in that in any way?
Yeah, I just team rope.
Okay.
Or sometimes breakaway roping, but fortunately, I never had to count on that for my livelihood because other than maybe a few buckles, I didn't do very well. But I enjoy it, and I still rope. My wife is a header, and I heel for her, but otherwise I head for several other folks that I rope with.
And what other activities did you participate in college that helped you?
Oh, I played football. I wasn't a very good basketball player, but I played football, defense most of the time. In fact, I sprint spring ball right here on this campus with Lyle Smith.
Really?
In 1964.
Oh my gosh.
Before I matriculated over to the College of Idaho. And so I played football, but I ski, water ski, snow ski. I've run quite a few marathons, probably not as many as I wished that I had run, but I do a lot of horseback riding yet.
Oh, okay.
I enjoy that.
Very good. Who are some of the most influential people throughout your life that shaped your character and who you are today?
Well, they would be surprised in my early education career, let's say in elementary and junior high, they would be surprised, but I would say the nuns, you know, sort of built a necessary discipline for getting your education. But obviously my folks, my mother, who is 100 years old in February, she'll be 101. All 9 of us kids are still alive. We lost my dad in '89, but my dad was very influential in my life. But I've been really fortunate. In business, Mr. Simplot was a guy by the name of Paul Hansen, was probably the guy that had the greatest influence in my life on how to treat people, you know, how to take responsibility and then carry through on what the expectations are. But certainly Mr. Simplot, Governor Batt was a great influence in my life. He's the one that kind of got me started into politics, suggesting that I should run for the House of Representatives, representing Canyon County at the time. I spent 8 years under Cecil Andrus, which for the most part was a very pleasant experience and a learning experience. So, you know, as you go through life, through different things, so there's the business world and then there's the spiritual world. And so I've had some very fortunate priests in my life that have been good counsel.
Well, you spoke of J.R. Simplot Company. I know you served on the board of directors. You were president of the livestock and president of Simplot International, correct? So could you tell me more about those unique business opportunities? Great company, great family, and you know, if you look into the heart and the spirit of most very successful corporations that aren't just successful on the bottom line, where there's always hopefully a black number, but also successful in their communities. And it's very difficult to go around Idaho and not see where Simplot Company and that Simplot family, the second generation now that is running the company, and the third generation coming on, has a great civic responsibility and a great civic virtue. And so you learn more than just dollars and cents and product development and marketing. You also learn an awful lot about life and what your responsibility is in the communities. And I say again, it's awful hard to go around Idaho and not see the footprint, a large, huge footprint that Simplot has had. But there's other companies as well. You know, Joe Albertson was obviously great. Morrison Knutz and on the other end of the state, Frank Vandersloot. So, you know, we're very fortunate that the companies that we do have in Idaho share a very important civic virtue, I call it, for what they get done in their communities. Speaking of businesses in Idaho, there has been a lot of new businesses that have relocated and expanded in Idaho, such as Chobani, Glambia, and Go-Go Squeeze now. You know, how does this impact Idaho, and do you see this trend continuing? Well, it not only impacts, you know, obviously our present with the capitalization that goes on and increasing the tax base for the communities in which they seek situs and then put their brick and mortar in place and then hire the employees and, you know, all of that. But it also gives us a challenge, like right here on this campus. You know, if you take a look at we're sitting right here in the Simplot Micron building. I remember when Micron was 2 people. The first time Mr. Simplot introduced myself and my brother-in-law Scott and my brother-in-law Don to the totality of Micron technology, it was 2 people. And you look out at that great, magnificent manufacturing plant and research and development that they have out there now. So, you know, we need to stay ahead of the curve because the boys that started Micron technology, for the most part, were educated someplace else. And we need to grow our own. And that's why with K through career in our education, that's why with the new STEM Action Center, the 5-year plan that we have for education in Idaho are so terribly important. Because the magic for the future happens today on this campus. Yes, and you spoke of the STEM Action Center. You recently appointed Angela Hemingway to lead the STEM Action Center. Can you what a ball of energy she is. Could you explain more about that and the initiatives? Well, what we need to do is we need through STEM, which means science, technology, education, or engineering, and math. We need to prepare that pipeline for the future. So as, you know, if you take a look at that new Simplot plant over in Caldwell, when I worked at that plant, we produced about 350 million pounds a year, 38,000 pounds an hour on those lines. And we had, I'm going to say 1,500 people employed there. It's all being run now
by folks who have, through one portal or another, have gone through the STEM education system, because it's all being run by computers and bells and whistles and things that you just can't imagine. And they're producing almost twice as much as we ever did, and much higher yields out of the raw material, which all of those things really keep the price of products down, but increase the quality of the products, but not so much the price. So education and filling that pipeline with the future needs of the folks of Idaho. Look, we got Clif Bar to come to Idaho, and Clif Bar never had a plant. Have you ever eaten a Clif Bar?
Yes.
All right. Well, it's a great energy bar, you know, and it's very tasty.
Yes.
As well. And they had never had a plant. They always co-packed. They went to some other company and some other plant and said, this is what we want our bar to look like, this is the ingredients that we want in it, this is what the wrapper looks like, and this is how many we need. And so they had somebody else doing that for them. And then all of a sudden they decided, you know, Idaho would be a good place for us to build our own first plant. And so now we have the Clif Bar plant right here in Idaho. And as they put that little Made in Idaho label on it, which I'm trying to convince them to do, as I do all companies, you know, I think it's going to be great. Amy's Kitchen, that moved into Pocatello, the old craft plant in Pocatello. Not only just for the food stuff and the quality of the food stuff and the quality of the employees they have and the research and development that's going on for the next generation of products, but I would tell you this, our whole farming community is adjusting, because they only want to use organic grown vegetables. They only want organic. And it takes 3 years to certify an organic farm.
Yes.
And so our whole farming community, our agricultural community, but it's a great value-added opportunity for us.
And speaking of organic farms, is that in the process? Are they transitioning into that?
Our Department of Agriculture has set up most of its federal standards through USDA and FDA, but it takes 3 years in order to qualify a farm, certify a farm that it's been chemical-free for 3 years, you know, and other alternatives. And I would imagine that probably, you know, it's hard for me to say, but it wouldn't surprise me if we don't have thousands of acres dedicated to organic farming in Idaho, because that's what Clif Bar wants.
Yes.
That's what Glanbia wants. That's what Chobani wants. And that's certainly what Amy's Kitchen, which is kind of the flagship of organic foods, is, and absolutely great food that they demand. And so it's having to change our practices, but we have to start educating, and have been educating, folks in the agricultural colleges and in the processing colleges, the manufacturing efforts right here in Idaho, in order to be able to meet that demand as it comes. And Go-Go Squeeze is another tremendous example, taking over the old Micron plant in Nampa. So the advantages that we have here in Idaho are tremendous, but the best advantage that we have is our work ethic in Idaho. We're kind of family concentric, and we know that each member of the family, just like when I was growing up, had a certain responsibility to the family, and we still see that great virtue in Idaho today, and that then creates a good, dedicated, disciplined, highly motivated workforce. Now we got to educate that workforce for the coming needs, because remember this too, Ann, and I'm going on and on and on here, and I know you got another question, but this is really important. Not that your other questions aren't, but
no, go ahead.
But you know, I would tell you that as we get companies like Chobani, and everybody else says, wait a minute, why did Chobani go to Idaho instead of Utah or Texas or California, where they were also looking? And so it kind of gives us some bona fides and some braggadocious opportunities to say, you know, we got one of the biggest companies and one of the fastest growing companies in the United States. And so now the people that are making the plastic cups for the yogurt, Now they're coming to Idaho because they want to make the plastic cups and other ingredients, whether it's besides the milk, whether it's the not the vegetables, but the fruits that they put in. All of those are tremendous opportunities. So as we create these clusters of industries, we also have to create clusters of innovators that are going to go in, that are in high school or in college or someplace in the education curriculum today, to generate for them the innovation to create Chobani's next generation of yogurt.
Yes. Speaking of that, can you explain the Choose Idaho initiative?
The Choose Idaho?
Yes.
Well, what happens is, you know, kids, folks graduate from college and they decide to go someplace else to go to school. They go someplace else to go to school, and then they kind of like where they are, whether it's like my son in Seattle, or you know, other kids that were born and raised in Idaho and educated in Idaho up until college. Anyway, they kind of get out there and they stay out there, and then they get a job someplace else. And so what we're asking those folks is take another look at us and come home. You got a good education system, you got a great contribution to make to Idaho's economy and to make to Idaho's future. Come on back home. We'd like to have you back home.
Great. And going back to college, what do you think attracts students from other states and other countries to an Idaho school?
Well, because we've got great education opportunities here. You know, even though the tuition continues to creep up a little bit, we're trying to do some things with the state budget that will relieve some of that strain on the finances for students. We created the College of Western Idaho, which is the community college now in Nampa. And so that gives students an opportunity that don't know if they really do not know if they're college material. And so they say to themselves, well, I don't know if I want to go to school or not. Plus, I don't know if I want to pay that tuition that I have to per credit hour at a four-year institution. Well, I can go to CWI for half, or I can go to CSI for half, or Northern Idaho Community College for about half of what it would cost me at a four-year institution. And then they find out at the end of 2 years, you know, I'm a pretty good college student. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay right here in Idaho and get the education and do what I can to stay in Idaho and raise my family here. I mean, it's a great place, obviously, with all the opportunities that we have.
Yeah, and CWI hasn't been there very long. I wonder why it took so long to get a community college here.
Pardon me, Ann, for running over the top of you. But there was some pent-up demand, and that was pretty. Bob Kustra told me here a couple of weeks ago at the president's meeting that I had with the presidents of the universities and the colleges, that for the first time that he can remember, there are more seniors at Boise State than there are freshmen.
Wow.
So part of that is CWI. We for a better word, cannibalized, you might say, a lot of the freshman class that would have come in. So there was a lot of pent-up demand, and you know, I think I was told there was like 9,200 students over there now, 17,000 part-time students. So the part-time students is really interesting to me as well, because when I say K through career, you know, I know what you're studying to do now. You're studying to sit at a desk like this and interview has-beens like me, and try to find out, you know, what my life is all about and what our future is all about. But I would also tell you, there's a pretty good chance that you might have 2 other or 3 other careers. And every time we've got a portal, and Boise State is one of them, University of Idaho, ISU, Lewis and Clark, is an opportunity to go back and say, you know, I was qualified to be an anchor, but you know, I've decided I want to work in HR. So now you can go back to the university, and that's what we're seeing at the CSI, is the non-traditional student, or the person looking for their second career. And if the averages bear out, each person will have about 3 careers in their life. Where when I spent 30 years with Simplot. I spent the whole 30 years with Simplot in business. Other careers, I was happy there. The family's a great family. They got a great company. And I just didn't have an idea of going anyplace else. That's where I wanted to spend my time. But I think in your generation, you're going to see where 3 and 4 careers are not going to be that unusual. Right.
And you mentioned K through career a couple different times. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Right. Well, for instance, when we start out in kindergarten, We hope, and one of our efforts is to get kids by the 3rd grade reading at grade level, because from kindergarten, or even if they're being homeschooled or if they're involved in preschool, from that point when they begin to the 3rd grade is when they read to learn, or they learn to read. After that, they actually read to learn. Because that's when the cognitive process starts, and what I'm reading on this paper can I do on this workbench. You know, if I read this about a combustion engine in a magazine, can I fix this engine? So I have to apply what I learn. And so that's our biggest effort right now. Well, there's a lot of efforts right now. We also need, you've heard of the 60%. We need to have 60% of the folks in Idaho between the ages of 24 or 25 and 34 with a degree or certification to meet the workforce needs. Ken Edmonds from our Department of Employment estimates that we're going to be about 95,000 people short of the jobs that are going to be demanded in Idaho by the year 2020. And so the only place we can correct that anemia is in K through career, is within our education system, starting in kindergarten and preschool, if that's where a lot of students are starting, all the way up to when they reach 65 or whenever they decide to retire.
So on the topic of education, what other programs or initiatives are you involved in here at Boise State or at other Idaho colleges?
Well, you know, that's the center of opportunity for almost everything else that happens in the state, because that's going to be the economy. And our ability to fashion our economy by fashioning our workforce development, attracting the kind of companies, keeping companies here in Idaho because they can develop the workforce, because we have these innovation centers, because we have folks that are willing to go into a company and take their present product and develop and innovate for the next generation. So all of those things are exciting. So I guess what we're working on is building, this is the first time I can remember in all of my involvement in Idaho where we actually had a 5-year education plan. And the task force that was put together, I think has done a tremendous job and got a great partnership in working for education with the legislature, because the legislature stepped up to the plate. We made the commitment 2 years ago. We continued with that commitment last year. We're going to continue with that commitment right on through until we have completed our 5-year plan. And we may even push out a couple more years and say we're going to renew that 5-year plan every year.
Can you explain more about that 5-year plan?
Well, that 5-year plan says, you know, we've got to develop and give our teachers an opportunity for more professional development. We need to put them on a career path. So our career ladder says, okay, this is what you're making today, and we've increased that over what it used to be. This is what you're making today, and in 3 years you can be at this level. Then you can move on into the professional certification, because the most important tool we got in education today is the teacher in the classroom. That teacher in the classroom, if they've got the capacity, and most of them do, to challenge that creative genius that God gave every one of our students sitting in those classroom seats, that challenge will carry us right into the workforce that we need, right into the kind of economy that we need, and enable us to do a lot of other things.
So what are some of the accomplishments that you are most proud of during your time as governor?
Well, we came through a tough recession starting in '08. And I'm proud that we in the administration were able to create a good partnership with the legislature and an understanding populace in Idaho that said, you know, we're just going to work harder. We're not going to increase taxes. We're not going to, there are some things we're going to have to cut back, and we did, and it was painful. But we stayed the course, and I think setting an example in Idaho, not only for the future Idaho leaders, but also for other states. That's why, you know, it always thrills me when I see a new standard come out or a new poll come out and say Idaho's in the top 10 in the 15 standards that are set by industry. Idaho's in the top 10.
Wow.
And we're in the top 22 in all of them.
Wow.
And so, you know, I'm most proud of the people of Idaho that stayed the course when we asked them, you know, it's going to be tough, but stay the course here. We don't want to raise taxes. We think that'd be the wrong thing to do. And we've come out of it pretty fast compared to a lot of other states. We were just rated the 6th best small business, best state to start a small business. All of those things I'm very proud of.
And I actually read your State of the State address and watched it as well.
Oh, bless you, my child.
You mentioned Idaho learns a lot. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
We learn from our mistakes, and we learn from our successes, and that's what that was. And by the way, you got a pretty low threshold for entertainment if you like my State of the State. But we learn from our mistakes, and you know, it was once said by somebody a long time ago that he said, to try and fail is at least to learn, but to fail to try is to suffer the inestimable cost of what might have been. And we've got a lot of successes because we continued to try. And in some cases, we failed. We learned from our mistakes, and we straightened the course, and said, we're not going to let that happen again.
All right, and what are some of the things that you're most looking forward to in this next upcoming legislative session?
Well, right now, all the revenues look pretty good. So I can remember those years. In fact, the media people asked me about it several times. That I think it was like, it was 2010 or 2011 when one of the media folks came up to me and said, you were very happy, you were very animated in this State of the State. I said, I've been delivering bad news for all these years, and now that we see the economy growing and we see the revenues coming in, and now we're able to do a lot of the things that we couldn't do and replace some of the things that we had to take away. That is good news. And it's good news because, once again, the people stayed with us. They had faith that we were going in the right direction and we were making the right decisions, and that we had decided that we were going to learn from our failures. And so every place that I used learn in there, you'll see where I was reflecting back on either a failure or a success.
Governor Otter, we just have a few more minutes. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about today, or anything else you'd like to say?
Well, first off, let me say again, Anna, thanks for this opportunity, because I don't get this kind of opportunity very often. Maybe as you get a little older and get into the media people, you'll learn how to shut people like me up, and maybe keep me a little bit more on course and not let me get in the weeds. But you know, I just have to tell you, Idaho has got a great future because we've got great institutions that are working very hard to have Idaho have a great future. And in those institutions, we've got great people, great leadership. You know, when I look at our presidents, when I look at our, not only the four-year institutions in Idaho, but also the community college institutions, and how willing they have been to step up to the plate and help us build workforces, build a future for the state of Idaho. I just have to say I am so grateful, and I'm glad I didn't become Pope.
It's interesting how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was really a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for tuning in to UTP Presents. I'm Anna Silver, and have a great day.
Is that it?